Eliana took a moment, collecting her thoughts. The tension in her chest had loosened, but the weight of what happened at her baby shower still hung in the air. She wasn't sure if telling the story was easier or harder each time, but she knew she had to finish it. I had decided I wasn't going to let her ruin my day, but I needed to figure out how. I couldn't just snap at her or call her out in front of everyone. It would only make things worse. And you know what? I wasn't going to let her make me feel small anymore. I didn't care if she was my mom. I didn't care if we were supposed to be close. That wasn't going to stop me from taking control of my own life. She shifted in her seat, looking down at her hands as if gathering strength. The more she criticized the party, the more I could feel my patience running thin. I had planned every detail of the shower. Every decoration, every game, every little touch was carefully chosen. I wanted this day to be perfect. Not just for me, but for the baby. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, of love, of all the excitement that comes with starting a new chapter in life. But instead, all I heard from my mom were little comments that chipped away at my joy. Eliana looked up at the camera, her eyes intense. And then it happened. My mom, in front of everyone, started making these comments about the baby name we'd picked. I'd told everyone the name we'd chosen a few days before the party, and it was one I loved. But my mom? She didn't think it was appropriate. She didn't think it was good enough. She even said, "Why would you pick something so unconventional?" Her voice was dripping with disapproval, and I could feel every pair of eyes turning to me, waiting for my reaction. She leaned forward, her hands resting on the table as her voice lowered. That was the moment I knew I had to stand up. I could no longer keep swallowing her criticisms, hoping it would get better. I had to do something. Something that would make her realize that I wasn't going to take this anymore. A soft chuckle escaped Eliana's lips as she continued. But I knew I couldn't just tell her off. No, that wouldn't have worked. It had to be something better. Something that would not only take her by surprise, but also show everyone else in the room that I had a voice. That I wasn't just the girl she still saw me as. I was an adult, a soon-to-be mom, and I deserved respect. So I waited for the right moment. She sat back, the glint of a plan unfolding behind her eyes. The party was winding down, and people were starting to say their goodbyes. It was almost over, and my mom was still throwing those little barbs at me. That's when I knew it was time. I walked to the front of the room where I had set up a table with all the baby gifts we'd received, and I asked everyone to gather around. Her expression softened, as though recalling the moment with a sense of bittersweet pride. I smiled at everyone, and then I turned to my mom. I looked right at her, and I said, "Mom, I know you have strong opinions about my choices, and I respect that. But there's one thing you need to understand. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me. I've spent my whole life listening to everyone else's expectations, but this is the one thing I get to choose on my own." Eliana's voice caught for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. The room was quiet. People were staring, and I could see my mom's face change from one of defiance to confusion. She didn't know how to respond, and that, in that moment, was enough. It wasn't about her being wrong. It was about me standing up for myself and showing that I wasn't afraid anymore. She smiled, the memory now bringing a sense of peace. And then, just when I thought things might calm down, I surprised her. I pulled out the envelope with the ultrasound picture inside. It wasn't just any ultrasound. It was the gender reveal that we hadn't done yet. I had kept it a secret from everyone, even from my mom, because I wanted it to be a moment just for me. Eliana paused, her hands shaking slightly as she relived that moment. I handed the envelope to her, and I said, "Mom, if you're so concerned about the future, here's a glimpse of what it's going to look like. This is your future grandchild. I'm the one who's bringing them into the world, and I want you to be there for me, not tear me down." She paused for a second, as though letting the moment breathe. She opened the envelope slowly, and when she saw the picture, her face changed. All the anger, all the judgment, it vanished for a second. She looked at the ultrasound, then at me, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't know what to say. It was like I'd finally given her something she couldn't argue with. Eliana smiled, her eyes bright. I watched her face soften, and in that moment, I knew I had won. Not because of the surprise or the picture, but because I had finally taken control. I had set my boundaries, and I had shown her that I wasn't afraid to stand up for myself. Her voice grew stronger now. I wasn't going to let her ruin my joy anymore. I wasn't going to let anyone, not even the people closest to me, take away my happiness or make me feel small. I had learned to respect myself, and now I expected the same from her. And maybe, just maybe, it was the first step in her learning to do the same for me. Eliana leaned back, her eyes far off in the distance as she remembered the aftermath of that moment. The surprise, the silence, and then the slow, awkward shift in the room. For a second, she had thought everything would go back to normal. But she knew better now. The truth was, standing up for herself had set off a chain reaction, one that couldn't be undone. For a moment, she began slowly, her voice softer now. I thought I had finally broken through to her. That moment, when she saw the ultrasound picture and everything changed in her face, felt like the turning point. But what I didn't realize was how long it would take for her to really get it. How long it would take for her to understand that I wasn't just the girl she thought she knew. I was a woman, a mother, and I deserved respect. She looked at her hands for a moment, running her fingers along the edge of the table. For the next few weeks, things were awkward, to say the least. My mom tried to reach out, tried to make amends, but it was always in that weird, hesitant way. She'd call, but instead of asking about the baby or how I was doing, she'd just comment on random things, like the color of the nursery walls or whether I had picked out enough baby clothes. It was like she was trying to ease back in, but she didn't know how to say sorry or really connect with me. And I could feel it. That distance was still there. Eliana exhaled, her eyes clouding over as she thought about the long, drawn-out silence between them. I wanted her to understand. I wanted her to realize that her behavior was affecting me. But how do you make someone see that? How do you make them realize that you're not a child anymore? I kept thinking, if she could just see how much I've changed, how much I'm growing into this new role as a mom, maybe then she'd finally stop questioning everything I did. But it didn't happen like that. Not at first. She shook her head, a small laugh escaping her. The thing is, I realized I was holding on to something that was never going to be the same. I wanted my mom to be the way she always had been, the person who'd support me no matter what, the one who'd shower me with excitement. But she wasn't that person, not anymore, and I couldn't keep waiting for her to be. I had to accept that I was going to have to navigate this new chapter in my life on my own. Her voice grew more assured as she continued. That realization wasn't easy. It hurt. I had to let go of the expectation that everything would go back to the way it was. But the truth was, I didn't need her approval anymore. I didn't need her to validate my choices or my life. I had already made the decision to be a mother, and I wasn't going to let anyone, least of all her, take that joy from me. I wasn't going to let anyone keep me from becoming the woman I needed to be. Eliana's eyes softened as she looked down at her lap, the weight of her words settling in. It wasn't just about my mom, though. It was about me, about realizing that my happiness, my peace, didn't depend on anyone else. I had to find that within myself, and I had to stop letting the toxic parts of my past, the parts of me that had been shaped by others, control my future. She paused, taking a breath as though gathering herself for what came next. A few months later, something happened. We were having a small family gathering, just me, my mom, and a few other relatives. It wasn't a big event, just a casual evening, but my mom, she did something that surprised me. She pulled me aside. For the first time in a long time, she really looked at me, and she apologized. Her expression softened, a hint of emotion flickering in her eyes. She said, "I'm sorry, Eliana. I didn't mean to make you feel like I didn't support you. I've been holding on to my own fears about you becoming a mother. But the truth is, I've watched you grow in ways I didn't expect, and I was wrong to try and control that." She was tearful, and I could see she was sincere. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't some grand gesture, but it was real. And for the first time, I felt like I had finally been seen for who I was, not for who she thought I should be. Eliana's voice softened, her shoulders relaxing as the weight of her words lifted. It wasn't the fairy tale ending I thought I'd get. There were no fireworks, no instant reconciliation. But in that moment, I realized something important. Sometimes the people we love need time to catch up with the people we're becoming. They need time to understand the changes, and sometimes we have to meet them halfway. It wasn't about her being perfect. It was about her showing up for me in the way I needed, and that's what made all the difference. She smiled slightly, the tension in her features easing. I wasn't expecting her to be perfect, or to suddenly agree with everything I did. But I knew one thing for sure. She was trying. And that was enough. It was more than enough. Because in the end, it wasn't about the baby shower or all the small things she'd said. It was about us figuring out how to move forward, together, on our own terms. Eliana's expression grew more peaceful, and she stood, stretching slightly as if shedding the weight of the past. We may never fully understand each other, but that's okay. What matters is that I stood up for myself. And in doing so, I realized that I didn't need anyone else's approval to be happy. The most important approval I needed was my own. Eliana took a moment, breathing in deeply, allowing the weight of her words to settle. She had come a long way since that baby shower, and the path ahead still felt uncertain in some ways, but the clarity in her heart was undeniable now. Looking back, I can see that I wasn't just fighting to be respected as an adult. I was fighting to find my own voice. It's easy to get lost in the expectations that others have for you, especially when they've been there for so long. And it's not just about the big things, like being a mother or making life-changing decisions. It's in the small, everyday moments too. The quiet things that people do or say that you let slide, thinking it's not a big deal. But after a while, those small things add up. She paused, her eyes focused on the distant horizon, lost in thought. It wasn't until I had the courage to speak up that I realized how much I had let slide, how much I had kept quiet about because I didn't want to rock the boat. I wanted to keep the peace, to keep everyone happy. But at what cost? My peace, my happiness, my sense of self? I had been living for everyone else's expectations, and I had forgotten to live for me. Eliana's hands rested gently in her lap, the story now flowing out with more ease, as if the burden of it all was starting to lift. That moment at the baby shower was the wake-up call I needed. I never thought I'd have the courage to stand up to my mom, especially not in front of everyone. But once I did it, I realized I had been holding that power all along. All I needed was to trust myself enough to use it. She shifted in her seat, her voice becoming more reflective. Of course, it wasn't a perfect solution. After that, we still had our moments, misunderstandings, tensions, the kind of stuff that happens when two people are trying to reconcile what they thought they knew about each other. It wasn't smooth sailing, and it wasn't always easy. There were times when my mom would still make little comments, times when I would want to snap back. But I had learned something important. It was okay to set boundaries. It was okay to speak my truth, even if it made her uncomfortable. A soft smile crept onto her face, a peaceful look in her eyes. And as time went on, things did get better. Slowly. My mom started respecting my decisions more, and even though we didn't always see eye to eye, I could feel the shift. She started showing up in ways that mattered, not just for the baby, but for me. I'd catch her giving me that little nod of approval, or listening without judgment when I told her something important. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Eliana looked down at her hands, thinking about the emotional journey she had been on. I didn't need her to validate every choice I made, but knowing that she was there for me in her own way was enough. And that's when I realized sometimes it's not about changing someone else. It's about changing yourself. It's about finding the strength to be the person you need to be, even when it's hard, even when it means disappointing others. She looked up, her eyes bright with the realization that had taken root deep inside her. I also learned that love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. We often have this idea in our heads of what love should be, what support should look like. We think it's all about grand gestures, unwavering approval, constant affirmation. But love, true love, is about respect. It's about understanding that even though we may not always agree, we can still support one another. We can still stand by each other, even from a distance. Eliana's hands gently clasped together, and she leaned forward slightly, her voice filled with newfound strength. That lesson changed everything for me. It helped me stop looking for approval outside of myself. It helped me realize that I was capable of standing on my own 2 feet, regardless of who supported me. And in the end, that was the most empowering thing of all. She paused, allowing the silence to settle in. Don't get me wrong, I still wanted my mom to be there for me, to be the kind of support I thought I deserved. But I stopped needing it. I stopped relying on it. Instead, I started filling myself with my own strength, my own sense of purpose, and my own peace, and that made all the difference. Eliana's expression softened, the calm strength of someone who had walked through the storm and emerged stronger. Now, when I look at my baby, I'm not just thinking about the future. I'm thinking about the legacy I want to create for them, the kind of person I want them to grow up knowing, someone who isn't afraid to speak up, someone who knows their worth, someone who stands up for themselves no matter who's in the room. A deep sigh of relief escaped her lips, the weight of the journey still lingering but now softened by the peace she had found. I know it's not always going to be easy. There will always be moments of doubt, of uncertainty, but I'm not afraid anymore. I've learned how to be my own advocate. I've learned how to love and support myself, and now I'm passing that on to my child. She smiled again, this time with a sense of finality. That's the real gift. That's the lesson. And that's the power of standing up for yourself, no matter how hard it is. Because once you do, you realize just how strong you really are. As Eliana stood up, the weight of the past seemed to lift from her shoulders. She had told her story, and in doing so, she had given herself the freedom to move forward. The journey wasn't over, but she was ready to face whatever came next, stronger than ever before. Eliana leaned against the window, her hands pressed lightly against the glass as she looked out at the world beyond. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over everything, and for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. The air felt different, lighter somehow, as though the weight of her past had been slowly lifted with each passing day. I never imagined that standing up for myself would be this freeing, she began, her voice calm but filled with quiet strength. But it's not just about standing up for yourself when things get hard. It's about being willing to face the hard truths, even when they're uncomfortable, even when they force you to grow in ways you didn't think you could. She sighed, letting the thought linger in the air. When I first spoke up to my mom, I thought I was just defending my choices, just protecting my happiness. But what I didn't realize then was how much I was actually protecting myself, how much I was reclaiming pieces of me that I'd been losing for years. Eliana turned from the window, her gaze soft but sure. For so long, I thought I was supposed to be someone else's idea of who I should be. For my mom, I was always her little girl. For everyone else, I was the person who always smiled, who always did what was expected. But inside, I was hurting. Inside, I was lost. I had become so wrapped up in everyone else's opinions that I didn't know who I was anymore. And it wasn't until that moment at my baby shower, when I finally spoke up, that I realized I was allowed to be me. Fully. Completely. She smiled slightly, almost wistfully. It's strange, isn't it? How we let others define us, without even realizing we're doing it. We think we're being the good daughter, the good friend, the good person. But in the end, that's not enough. We have to be true to ourselves. We have to take the time to figure out who we are outside of everyone's expectations. Eliana sat down, her posture more relaxed now as she continued. It's funny because I always thought that if I stood up for myself, it would make me look selfish or difficult. But what I've learned is that it doesn't. In fact, it makes you stronger. When you start setting boundaries, when you start defining who you are, it gives you the freedom to love and respect others in a way that doesn't drain you. It allows you to be your best self, not a version of yourself trying to please everyone else. Her eyes grew distant, reflecting the inner peace that had begun to settle within her. I didn't expect this kind of transformation. I thought it would be one big aha moment and that everything would be perfect afterward. But it's not like that. Change is messy. It's gradual. It's the kind of thing that sneaks up on you, one small shift at a time. At first, it feels uncomfortable, like you're stepping into shoes that don't quite fit. But then, slowly, they start to feel right. And one day, you realize you've become someone new, someone you can be proud of. She paused for a moment, taking in a deep breath. The thing is, I didn't just have to stand up to my mom that day. I had to stand up to my past, to all the years I spent trying to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. I had to tell myself that it was okay to change. It was okay to be different. It was okay to grow into the person I was always meant to be, even if it meant stepping away from expectations. Eliana stood up again, her hands moving as she spoke, her words growing more passionate. And it's not just about family or friends. It's about anyone who tries to tell you who you should be. Whether it's your job, your partner, or society at large, you have to find your own way. You have to stop waiting for permission to live the life that makes you happy. You have to stop letting fear hold you back. Because if you don't, you'll find yourself stuck in a life that doesn't belong to you. You'll find yourself living someone else's version of success. She smiled again, a genuine smile that reflected her newfound sense of peace. I look at my baby now, and I know that I want to teach them the most important lesson I've learned in my life. Be unapologetically you. Don't let anyone tell you who you should be, how you should live, or what you should want. You get to decide. You get to write your own story. Her voice softened, her tone quieter now, filled with the wisdom that came from personal experience. I know there will be more challenges ahead. I know that not everyone will agree with the choices I make, but I'm okay with that, because at the end of the day, I have myself, and I'm learning how to love and respect myself in ways I never did before. Eliana took a final deep breath, feeling the weight of her journey settle in her chest. It's been a long road, but I'm finally in a place where I'm not afraid to stand up for myself anymore. I'm not afraid to speak my truth, to live my truth. And that, in the end, is all that matters. She stood in front of the window, her eyes reflecting the sunset outside. And for the first time, she felt at peace with who she was. She had faced her fears, her insecurities, and her past, and she had come out on the other side stronger. And now, with the future ahead of her, she was ready to face whatever came next, with the confidence that only comes from knowing exactly who you are. And in that moment, Eliana knew that the hardest, most empowering thing she had ever done was to finally take control of her own life. Eliana stood there for a moment longer, feeling the weight of the day's reflections still resting on her shoulders. She could feel the soft hum of her thoughts lingering, but there was a shift now, a quiet power that she hadn't felt before. Her eyes turned to the door, and the realization that life had a way of moving forward, no matter how much you try to hold on, settled within her. She took a step back from the window, her fingers tracing the edge of the table beside her. You know, she started again, her voice steady but softer this time. When you first start making these changes in your life, you don't always realize the ripple effect it has. You don't realize how much you start to change, how much your mindset shifts, until one day you're standing there and everything feels different. And not just different on the outside, different on the inside. She sat back down, her hands resting gently in her lap, her fingers curling and uncurling as she spoke. It's like, for so long, I was stuck in this loop of trying to please others, trying to live up to their expectations. I thought that was what would make me happy, that if I could just be good enough for everyone, I'd be enough for myself. But the truth is, You can't ever really be happy that way. You can't ever really feel fulfilled until you stop living for others and start living for yourself. Eliana's eyes focused on her hands as she continued, the words coming with more ease now, like a story that was finally being told as it should have been from the start. I kept thinking that if I just kept trying harder, if I kept doing what my mom wanted or what everyone else expected, things would get better. But things only started to change when I stopped worrying about what everyone else thought. When I started making choices for me, not for them. She looked up, meeting her own reflection in the mirror across the room. That's when I realized how much power I had all along. It wasn't in anyone else's approval. It wasn't in trying to fit into someone else's mold. It was in owning my choices, owning my voice. And once I started doing that, once I started choosing for me, the world started opening up in ways I hadn't even imagined. Eliana smiled gently, the quiet power in her voice reflecting a sense of inner peace that had been hard-earned. I guess I never realized how much strength it takes to finally embrace who you are. You think you're just fighting to be heard, to be seen, but really you're fighting to see yourself. You're fighting to hear your own voice, to trust your own instincts. And when you finally do, it's like you're standing in the sun after years in the shadows. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing with thought. It's not about making everything perfect. It's not about being some ideal version of yourself that you think people want to see. It's about being real, being honest with yourself, and understanding that sometimes the hardest person to face is the one staring back at you in the mirror. Her voice softened, growing more intimate, as though she were sharing something deeply personal. When I looked in that mirror, I didn't just see a mom-to-be or the woman my mom had always tried to shape me into. I saw me. I saw someone who had been through so much, someone who had carried the weight of others' expectations for too long, and I saw someone who was finally ready to let all of that go and be herself. Eliana paused, a small sigh escaping her lips. I think that's the hardest part of growing up, not the responsibilities or the challenges or even the pain. It's realizing that you're the one holding the keys to your own life. And for so long, I let others have them. I let my mom hold them. But when I decided to take them back, when I finally let go of the control I thought they had over me, that's when everything started to change. She smiled again, the softest laugh escaping her lips. And let me tell you something. Everything got so much easier. I didn't have to fight for approval anymore. I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. I wasn't fighting for a place in their world. I was creating my own world. A world where I was free to be me. Eliana stood up again, walking to the window and looking out at the fading light. I know there will be more challenges, more moments when I'll feel like I'm slipping back into old habits. There will be times when I'll want to go back to that place of seeking validation, of trying to make everyone happy. But now, I know better. I know that the only person I need to make happy is myself. I know that as long as I'm true to who I am, nothing and no one can take that away from me. She turned back to the room, the resolve in her posture clear now. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying I have all the answers. But I'm saying this. If you keep living for someone else's version of who you should be, you'll never get to live for yourself. You'll always be playing someone else's game. And I'm done with that. Her smile deepened as she finished, her voice soft but full of certainty. From here on out, I'm playing my own game. I'm the one in control. And nothing, not even the people who love me, can change that. As Eliana walked to the door, she paused, one last thought lingering in her mind. If you're still waiting for someone else to tell you who you are or how you should live, stop. You have the power to decide. You have the power to change. And when you take that power back, that's when the real freedom begins. With one last glance, she opened the door, ready to face whatever came next, with her heart light and her future all her own. The past was behind her, but the journey ahead was hers to write. As Eliana stepped out into the cool evening air, a sense of calm washed over her. The heavy weight that had clung to her for so long, the constant worry about pleasing others, about trying to meet everyone's expectations. Those things felt like distant memories now. She had let go of the need to control everything, to force others to see things her way. She had learned that the only person who could truly define her was herself. With each step, her mind wandered back to that day, the baby shower, the turning point when everything had changed. What had started as a day of celebration had turned into a painful reminder of how far she had allowed herself to be controlled. But the shift in her had been so much more than just a moment of defiance. It was the beginning of reclaiming her own life, her own voice. I always thought that fighting for your own happiness meant fighting against the people you loved, Eliana said to herself, her words barely above a whisper. But now I know. It's not about fighting them. It's about fighting for yourself. She smiled softly as she continued walking down the street, the quiet night settling around her like a warm embrace. The world seemed simpler somehow, as if the clarity she had found was somehow mirrored in the night sky above her. The stars twinkled brightly, reminding her that, like them, she had the power to shine, no matter the darkness she had walked through. Eliana took a deep breath, her hand resting on her stomach. Her baby, the little one who had brought so much joy and fear into her life all at once, was the reason she had pushed through everything. It wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't just about her relationship with her mom or anyone else. It was about being the kind of mother she wanted to be. A strong, loving, confident one. And that meant not just standing up for herself, but for her child too. It's not just about being strong for me, she continued to herself. It's about being strong for them. I need to show them that they can be anything they want to be, that they can stand up for themselves, and that they don't need anyone's approval to live their truth. I'm not just breaking generational patterns for myself. I'm doing it for the next generation. The idea was so simple, yet so profound to her now. For years, Eliana had been trapped in a cycle of needing approval, of seeking validation from others, especially her mom. But now she realized she didn't have to wait for anyone to tell her she was worthy. She had always been worthy, and her child deserved to know that too. I used to think that I needed everything to be perfect, to be in control, Eliana said, looking down at her hands, her fingers now more relaxed than they had ever been. But perfect doesn't exist. Control doesn't exist. Life is messy, but it's ours to live. And I've finally figured out that I can handle the mess. As she continued walking, Eliana felt something shift within her, something that had been dormant for years. She realized that for so long, she had put everyone else's happiness first, whether it was her mom's, her friends, or even her partner's. But now, she was taking back that power. She was allowing herself to prioritize her own happiness and peace. She had earned it. I don't need to be perfect, she thought, her mind racing with the realization. I just need to be me. And being me means embracing the imperfections, the mistakes, and the lessons. I don't need anyone else's approval. I have my own. The streetlights cast long shadows as she walked through the quiet neighborhood, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt empowering, as though she was walking toward a new chapter in her life, one that was built on her terms. She could already imagine the woman she was becoming, confident, strong, unapologetic. When she reached her house, Eliana stood at the doorstep for a moment, letting the sense of peace wash over her again. "This is just the beginning," she said softly, as if speaking to herself. "The beginning of a life where I get to decide who I am and how I live. The beginning of showing my child what it means to love yourself, to respect yourself, and to stand up for what you believe in." She smiled, turning the doorknob and stepping inside. The warmth of the house wrapped around her, and she felt at home, no longer in the physical sense, but in her own skin. She was finally at home with herself. Eliana sat down on the couch, her hand resting on her belly, the quiet comfort of the night surrounding her. The future felt less daunting now. It felt like a place she could shape, a place where her voice mattered, where her happiness mattered. And just like that, she realized that she wasn't just ready to face the future. She was ready to create it. Her phone buzzed on the table, and she glanced at the screen. It was a message from her mom. Eliana hesitated for a moment before picking it up, reading the simple words. "I'm proud of you, Eliana. I'm here for you. Always." A small tear slipped down her cheek as she smiled. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she didn't need to carry the weight of anyone's expectations on her shoulders. Her mom's words meant something different now. They didn't define her, but they showed that even after everything, there was room for growth and healing, room for love. And in that moment, Eliana knew that everything was going to be okay, because she had found her voice, and with it, she had found herself. The future wasn't just something to face, it was something to build, brick by brick, choice by choice, and she was ready. Eliana stood by the window once more, her fingers lightly grazing the glass as she looked out at the calm night. The world seemed still, but within her, everything had shifted. She had faced so many battles, internal and external, but the most important one was over. She had won not by fighting others, but by embracing herself fully, and that, she realized, was the ultimate victory. She turned back toward the room, a quiet determination in her eyes. "You know, I used to think that the hardest part of growing up was all the challenges that come with responsibility. The bills, the work, the constant pressure to get everything right. But now I see that the hardest part is knowing when to let go of the past, knowing when to stop carrying other people's expectations and start living for yourself." Her voice was calm, but there was an undeniable strength in the way she spoke now. "For so long, I lived in the shadow of my mom's opinions, in the shadow of what I thought I was supposed to be. I thought that if I could just please her, just do everything the way she wanted, everything would be okay. But I learned that you can't build a life based on someone else's dreams. You can't live for their approval and think it's going to make you happy. It might give you a momentary sense of relief, but it will never give you peace." Eliana took a deep breath, letting the weight of her own words sink in. "The moment I stood up for myself at that baby shower, I realized that I had been giving away my power for far too long. I had let others define my happiness, my choices, my life. And in doing so, I had lost myself. But standing up to my mom wasn't just about calling her out. It was about calling myself back. It was about saying, I am here, I have a voice, and it matters. She smiled softly, a lightness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. It wasn't easy. It wasn't immediate. But every day since then, I've been learning what it means to take care of me first, to listen to my own voice, to follow my own path. And now I know that no matter what life throws at me, I can face it head on with the confidence that I don't need anyone else's validation. I am enough, just as I am. Her hand rested gently on her stomach, the anticipation of the life growing inside her, adding a new layer of meaning to everything she had learned. The most important thing I can do for my child is to show them that they don't have to live for anyone else. They don't have to hide their truth or dim their light to make others feel comfortable. They can be exactly who they are, and that is enough. I want to teach them the lesson I've finally learned. Your happiness is yours to own. Your future is yours to create. Eliana took a moment to pause, letting the truth of her words settle in. She knew the journey was far from over, but now she felt ready for everything that was to come, ready to embrace life with all its challenges and rewards as her own. The road to self-discovery isn't easy. It's filled with doubts and fears and moments where you'll question yourself. But the most important thing is that you don't stop. You keep going. You keep growing. And eventually you'll look up and realize that you're not just surviving. You're thriving. And that's when you know you've won. She turned to face the camera one last time, her eyes filled with a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I'm glad I did. If you found something here that resonates with you, I'd love for you to stick around. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and join me as we keep exploring these life lessons and powerful journeys together. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Eliana's smile grew wider, the light in her eyes shining with the promise of new beginnings. Remember, the most important relationship you'll ever have is with yourself. Don't wait for someone else to give you permission to be who you are. You are enough, and you are worthy of the life you dream of. With one last look toward the future, Eliana turned away from the camera, ready to embrace everything that came next. The story was just beginning, and now she was ready to write it herself. Lesson of the story. The real strength lies in standing up for yourself and embracing who you are. It's not about seeking approval from others, but about living authentically and confidently. When you take control of your own happiness, you take control of your future.